Almost Halloween.
Almost Halloween. I'm going to a Halloween party right after I leave here, so I have another outfit on underneath my pirate outfit. So, nice. That's right. I'm ready to go. Quick change artist. My little ones are having a Halloween party.
Cool.
Welcome to Unity of Billings. So happy you're all here today with us. And our Sunday services are being live streamed. Thank you for helping to support our ministry. You may donate at PayPal if you wish, or go to unityofbillings.org, which is our fabulous website. And thank you so much. Next Sunday is Friendship Sunday Potluck, which is always delicious, always. And we would love to have you join us. Today, speaking of our October speakers, this is our last speaker of the month for October, and it's Reverend Leslie Fisher, which is our very own. Yay! I'm so excited. And she's going to share with us original grace. That's always a good thing to keep in mind. Living in grace. And now if you'll take a moment and center yourselves, and we will listen to the Unity Song with David Friedman.
Every prayer is answered, every prayer is heard, every thought and feeling, every spoken word, what your soul has longed for, what your heart can feel, is already here, is already real. There is no one out there, there is no one else. You hold all the answers deep inside yourself. There's a voice that whispers, there's no you, no me, there's just one, there's just unity. One power, one presence, one light to lead the way, all loving, all knowing, that answers when you pray. When the world looks darkest and your eyes can't see, gather all your troubles, give them all to me. I am always with you, I will always be. I am one, I am unity. We are one, we are unity.
Thank you, David. And now I light the Christ candle, which is a symbol of the indwelling Christ within all of us at all times and within our service today. Our daily word today speaks of creative. If you'll join me in affirming creative.
The creative energy of spirit expresses through me.
Stunning visual arts, inspirational music, a brilliant performance. These are all lovely examples of creativity, but they are by no means the only ones. Creativity is the very nature of life, from the most soaring, soul-inspiring instance to the mundane moments that fill daily life. Creative acts abound. Creative activities are prayers in action, a continuation of divine activity in its infinite manifestations. Living is a creative act. It's the way I am in the world, the way I love, and the way I relate to all others. Understanding in this way, I see how I am using my thoughts, feelings, and imagination to create my experiences. I bring my divine gifts to life through my creativity. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our own image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion." Genesis 1:26. And if you'll join me once again in affirming creative. The creative energy of the Spirit expresses through me. And now our unity of foundation principle and our unity of Billings affirmation. If you'll join me, there is only one presence and power in the universe and in my life, God the good, omnipotent. And our unity of Billings affirmation.
Through divine wisdom and grace, unity of Billings is vibrant, healing, and inclusive.
And now if you'll take a moment and gather your self and your prayers and your tithes and hold them in your hands and infuse them with your energy and your love. And join me in praying. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And I am grateful.
And we also have a special little, before we sing this, Jane is going to tell us a story.
Oh, how wonderful. Yes.
I never knew this story about this song, Amazing Grace. And Rick was looking it up, and it felt almost like we really needed to talk about this song. We sing so many things, say so many things, just like our affirmation. How much do we really feel it and acknowledge it, you know? It kind of becomes a habit after a while. And this song, it was interesting because we picked it and we didn't know that was going to be her talk, and we'll see how it works with it all. But John Newton wrote this song. He was born in London in 1725. He was an only child of a sea captain, and of course, what did the women do then? They were church-going women. The men would do their thing, and the women would go to church, right? You take the kids, sometimes force them in if you can. And his mother taught him to read the Bible and go to services, but she died when he was 7 years old. and his father and stepmother did not continue with that teaching, and he kind of veered off of the trail and got in trouble many times. As a young man, he fell in love very, very hard for a woman named Mary. He was only 19, and at that time, he had been forced to join the British Navy and go on to the cruise ship, where discipline was very harsh and food was very scarce. So his spirit was almost broken, but God seemed to be far away and uncaring. And when he tried and failed to escape, the captain stripped him and flogged him. And later he was transferred to another ship where he became involved in the brutal 18th century of slave trade. And the work was horrific and cost many human lives. And yet at that time, it was legal and lucrative because they got a lot of money from selling slaves. So his turning point he was aboard a slaving ship called the Greyhound, and the ship was in bad shape, and during a violent storm it began to fall apart and take on water. And a crew people were swept overboard and everything, and he had prayed all night long, tried to keep the ship from going under, and he actually thought about his life through those prayers, and he knew that he had run from God, hurt other people, and made a wreck out of his own situation, and even mocked the gospel. But he realized that he might die in the storm, and would God still forgive him even after he had rejected him? And at last, he recalled his mother had taught him that God loves to show mercy even to people who feel they are beyond redemption. So he asked God to help for the first time in years, and he survived the storm. A lot of times we do that, right? God, get me out of this situation, whatever. And you think that is God's hand. Perhaps it was. Transformed by grace. It didn't happen overnight, but his life began to be changed. He learned to pray. He found friends who shared his faith and could help him understand how it applied his life, which is what I believe unity is. Eventually, he gave up his role as a slave trade and stopped sailing for a living. Instead, he found Mary again, the young lady he fell in love with long ago, and he became a pastor of a small English church. He became a writer, and one of his hymns, guess what? Was Amazing Grace, which describes his very personal journey out of spiritual blindness and into the grace of God. So in his later years, he became a pastor for a larger church. He helped lead many people to God and whom he had mocked. And he also was very active in the movement to abolish slavery. The prime minister appointed him on the committee to investigate slave trade. And he was a key witness. He explained the horrors and the horrible, horrible things that happened to the slaves. And his compelling testimony, eventually slavery became illegal. So if you look in your books on page 16, I believe, in your hymnals, the first verse says, on the second stanza, saved a soul like me. That was changed. Because when he wrote it was save a wretch like me. And that's how he felt. So it was changed to a soul like me, which I really like. And we're going to sing it. Rick's going to play it. And I have not a voice today, but I will do my best to sing along. So you can either stand or sit. Page 16 in your hymnals.
grace appear, the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already passed. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far to freedom that will last.
Thank you. I noticed some of you didn't even need to use your books.
Always use
Freedom that will last. Let's say that a lot. Yes.
Thank you.
While you got your hymnals out, let's do Shirley the Presents.
Oh, okay.
Forgot to do that in the very beginning.
Let's do it, Ricky.
We'll get our,
Oh,
it's in the very back of your hymnals on a little piece of paper.
Very bad.
Glued on a blank page,
So you
about
made
3
second
in.
from the last
Yeah,
one.
it's very dark. It's kind of odd, but there's no page number, it's just there.
Okay, do you want to lead us?
Yeah.
You ready?
Ready? Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel His mighty power and His grace. I can feel the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
Well, we just tried to tell her that.
Oh, I thought you wanted to.
And now,
I'm not gonna force you.
I'm going to take a moment to bless our love offering.
That doesn't sound like it's working really well.
The speaker.
There.
Okay. Okay. Yes, so thank you, all of you, for your physical presence, for your tithes, for your prayers, for your energy, for your light, for your love. As all of that goodness and brightness is here with us today and from us, we take this energy and this love and this light. It infuses our church, our community, our country, our precious freedom. And so it is. Thank you. And now, I have the great pleasure of introducing, for those of you that may not know, Reverend Leslie Fisher. That's a new title for you.
Reverend in training.
Reverend in training.
I was like,
Reverend
whoa.
in training. It's like, all right.
Slow down.
Is she, well, over here it said Reverend.
I
It was
saw that over
there. It's like, awesome.
Not yet.
I'm like, so cool. Thank you, Leslie, for being here with us and your message of original grace.
All right. Just this. Can you hear me okay? Am I good?
No.
No?
I think the mic's just too far away.
I was gonna say, I don't know if it gets a whole lot closer, so I will do my best. All right. Adjust myself. It is so interesting that creative was the daily word today because I'm learning about the creation story in class. We had to metaphysically interpret it, and it was really eye-opening for me. And it kind of played a part in what I wrote today. And I don't know, it was like a nod, like, yep, you picked a good topic, that's the right day to talk about it. Someone here needs to hear this, nailed it. So it was a good feeling. actually have a poem that I wrote for one of my other classes that I wanted to share. So, it was pretty
Creative.
yeah. Okay, well, original grace. This is about St. Augustine, religious trauma, and the true nature of humanity. So who is St. Augustine? You may have come across the name if you're familiar with the Catholic saints, maybe if you're a voice for feminism within the sphere of religion, and maybe if you're really into theological history. Otherwise, you may not have ever heard of this guy. Augustine was a theologist of Berber origin. Berber refers to a diverse grouping of ethnic groups indigenous to North Africa, and the Berber people have been in that area since before the arrival of Arabs to that region. So just you kind of know where I'm talking about, some context. Think like Morocco, that area. His writings have deeply influenced the development of Western philosophy and Western Christianity. Although, at times throughout that development, this community has been a little bit embarrassed to be aligned with him due to some irreconcilable elements in his thought and teachings, which we're going to talk about. Augustine is known for popularizing many key Christian concepts, the big one being original sin, which is not to say that it was his idea, but he gave it a twist that was all his own. Original sin actually started as an idea that the Apostle Paul had. He took language from Hebrew texts and interpreted them to mean that humankind has a kind of inherited spiritual disease called sin. And I have to wonder, after doing this, I thought about it, I have to wonder if Paul didn't have a little bit of the same kind of unresolved guilt that Augustine had regarding his pre-Christian existence, and if that didn't inform his interpretations just a little bit. But Augustine taught it as the loss of the image of God, which it's funny that we were talking about that. Augustine taught it as the loss of the image of God that we were created in. He believed that through this original sin, we were forever cut off from our Creator, with no connection to divine mind. An article from Women in Theology, written by Dr. Mae Forrest Barnes, sums up the damaging aspect of this thought process really well. Quote, "Think for a moment about how the idea that losing the thing you were created with forms you. It makes you see that there is a portion of the population that has the image and some that do not. If you do not have it, you are thus lesser than the others. This can lead to all kinds of harmful ethics, up to and including ableism, sexism, and racism. You can see this in Aquinas, in his understanding of women being lower in stature than men in creation. You can see this in Luther, taking this as a basis and increasing the intensity, calling humanity post-Adam subhuman. The effects this theology has had on the church is catastrophic and ongoing," end quote. I thought it was really summed up well there, because it's been a sticky one. That said, St. Augustine clearly sought spiritual meaning throughout his life. He dabbled in Manichaeism, which is a former world religion founded in the 3rd century by Parthian prophet Mani. Manichaeism. No one's really original with naming throughout this, you'll find that out. And this prophet Mani, he had tried to kind of combine and squish together a lot of world religions at the time and slap his name on it and put himself at the top. That's basically what happened. So, one of those. And Augustine also delved into Hellenistic philosophy, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's like the Greek pantheon. So he was kind of dabbling in that as well in his younger years, before converting to Christianity in 386 AD. But even then, after he converted, he had his own ideas, and he continued to develop his own personal theology and philosophy. Now, Christianity as a religious movement does owe this man a lot. So before I roast him good, let me be clear. He had some good ideas, he really did. His bad ideas were just really, really bad. And unfortunately, those bad ideas are the ones that are always so sticky and pervasive. They manage to infiltrate the collective consciousness and take really deep root, and they stick around for centuries, and it's just not a good scene. So Augustine, once he had embraced Christianity, began something of a religious conquest, struggling to make his particular flavor of Christianity the flavor of choice in the 4th century North Africa. There were already well-established native African Christian traditions in practice, but he was determined, and I mean determined, like throwing a big boy tantrum determined, along with his colleague Bishop Aurelius of Carthage, to relentlessly push any dissenting practices out. However, he was not above pandering to the powers that be, aka Rome, in order to accomplish this end. So here's my issue with that. If you're willing to sacrifice your spiritual integrity to achieve your goals, what else are you willing to do? How much are you willing to twist the message for the sake of your own personal glory and reach? For someone who supposedly revered Jesus as master, he seems to have missed some things. Jesus taught the truth he knew to all who would listen, with no regard to whether or not it was going to elevate him personally. In fact, he was intentionally incendiary at times, because he was hoping to create an upset in certain circles. But he always spoke out of conviction to his cause, to his teachings, and he was utterly unwilling to compromise his integrity, no matter the consequences. Now, there was another form of Christianity growing at about that same time. Now it's called heresy, which really just means that at some point it was rejected as false by the ecclesiastical authorities that be. This form was called Pelagianism, taught by, would you guess, a philosopher named Pelagius. I told you, no original names in this. He and his followers emphasized the essential goodness of human nature and the freedom of the human will, which I think is something that Unity really embraces as well, and I love it. In his concern for the moral standards of his fellow Christians at the time, he sought to remind them of their inherent godliness in an effort to improve the situation. What an idea! Trying to convince someone to improve by convincing them that they're worthy of the improvement. It seems obvious to us today, but this philosophy directly opposed what the church was teaching at the time, and sometimes even now, which was that humanity was inherently prone to sin and almost incapable of any goodness of their own volition. On a side note, this is not what Jesus taught. And it is a little disheartening that even just 400 to 500 years after his time, his teachings were already being twisted to fit someone else's agenda. But I digress. It was actually one of Pelagius' students, Celestius, who outright denied the church's doctrine of original sin. Again, this is not a concept Jesus taught, but it does serve to help convince people that they need an outside force to make them be good, rather than encouraging introspection and fostering a connection with the inherent divine nature within all of us. This mode of thinking encourages the erroneous belief that we are somehow separate from spirit, that we can in any way be truly disconnected from the infinite source of life, which is absolute goodness. And that means we, being intentionally created in the image of that goodness, must also inherently be good. We do possess the freedom of will and the capacity of imagination, and between the two of those, we co-create our physical world hand in hand with divine mind. This means that we also have the capability to deviate from divine order, to bend and break the law that keeps the planets in motion, but thankfully, the other side of this coin is grace. Grace is the soft landing place in the heart of God that gently catches us when we trip up along our creative adventures. This grace is inherent in each of us as an expression of God, and it is this capacity that allows us to forgive others as well as ourselves. Both law and grace are modalities of divine love, much in the same way that a loving parent must uphold rules and provide consequences when those rules are broken, but is also there to catch, forgive, and gently guide the child back onto the path. So back to Augustine. He vehemently reacted to Pelagius' teachings to the extent that other people in the church were like, whoa. And they were kind of feeling a bit cautious about him and some of his ideas. But he was, again, a very persistent man, and eventually he did succeed in having Pelagius excommunicated, effectively crushing any lasting impact he might have had. This left a rhetorical space to fill that would lay the theological foundation for much of Christianity as we know it today. His views on sin and grace were deeply at odds with much of the ancient philosophical traditions of the Western world, and were heavily criticized in his lifetime, which is almost surprising when you consider how heavily Christianity has taken by his teachings. I lost my spot. It's also surprising because of how much of his philosophy is borrowed from pre- and non-Christian philosophy. He was familiar with much of this non-Christian philosophy from direct experience, again, harkening back to his younger years, dabbling in different schools of thought. He specifically drew frequently from his intimate understanding of the teachings of Platonism. But again, we see many of his ideas being challenged in the last 100 years by many different groups. As we grow as a species, and as we begin to heal from many of our collective traumas. That's why it's really best to come at him with an understanding that yes, his theological ideas held some truth, and clearly they spoke to enough people to withstand the weight of centuries. But he was still a person with a specific goal in mind, willing to go to seemingly any lengths to achieve that goal. This is always a slippery situation, but in the context of spirituality and religion, it can have lasting and highly detrimental consequences. He was irreparably distressed by the spiritual exploration of his youth, and this guilt seeped into his teachings and lent a hue of self-hatred to much of his work. This self-hatred, unfortunately, has become a normalized undercurrent in mainstream Christian theology. So why is it so important to address this literally thousands of years after the fact, and in the face of all the knowledge about our universe and ourselves that we've amassed since this time? It's of paramount importance because what we believe informs how we act. If we believe that we are truly good at our center, then we will operate out of that goodness much of the time. We'll make choices that align with that belief. However, if we truly believe that we are rotten to the core, we will behave as such. And this leads us into the realm of religious trauma. Religious trauma, according to therapist.com, occurs when a person's religious experience is stressful, degrading, dangerous, abusive, or damaging. Now, this doesn't have to take the form of a big T trauma, like being abused at the hands of a religious leader. It can be more along the lines of being constantly reminded what a failure you are, you're deeply flawed, you're imperfect, you have no hope without X. And it can be, little T trauma like that can be really complex, and it can create a lot of mental and emotional wounds and baggage that is just as damaging as big T trauma. And it can be hard to unpack and work through because the points of impact are spread out and harder to pinpoint. Religious trauma can manifest as the classic self-hatred that Augustine taught. It can be a deep, pervasive sense of shame. It can show up as perfectionism and people-pleasing. Hypervigilance, when you believe that the worst may happen at any time and you can never let your guard down. It can destroy your sense of community and create a deep sense of isolation. It can even result in debilitating mental health disorders like PTSD and CPTSD, depression, anxiety, OCD, eating disorders, and addiction. That's not to say, this is not to say at all that religion or Christianity is inherently traumatic, because it's not. It can be a beacon of hope, a place to belong, and a refuge from the chaos that life can often be. We all know that. This is to say that original sin is something we made up. Judaism, the direct predecessor to Christianity, from which we also gather a lot of our theology, does not see human nature as inherently tainted by sin. That's not something that Judaism teaches. But since the 4th century, and what I feel like was Augustine's attempt to purge himself of his guilt by projecting it onto the rest of the world, we have touted this harmful idea as fact and made it the hill upon which we choose to die, literally. I do not believe that humanity is inherently flawed. I believe that we are inherently flawed, to the point where we've convinced ourselves that we were never good to start with. I believe that humanity at its core is a direct manifestation of the Word of God, Logos, the divine idea that holds all ideas. As such, we have no choice but to be good. We have no choice because our source and our substance is good. The disconnect happens when we allow ourselves to believe that we are somehow separate from God. How can we be when we ourselves are a piece of God? Out of the omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience that is God, the perfect idea of humanity is given form, and along with that form, the capacity to imagine and the will to act upon ideas. I believe that we are expressions of God, here to deepen and widen the experience of God by experiencing, imagining, and creating our lives and our world. We were created to mentally expand and emotionally expand, and to create as we were created. We have, however, taken all the freedom of will that we have and given credence to make-believe concepts that we made up, like the idea that we might be separate from God. And like monsters under the bed, we've given that idea substance and believed it into existence. And even if that reality is only in our minds, it still informs and affects real-world actions and incurs real-world consequences. Therefore, I'd like to challenge your harmful beliefs about yourself. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself the next time you're struggling, hurting, or feeling bad. Are you berating yourself for your shortcomings? Are you reminding yourself that you were the problem? Are you talking about yourself with resentment and cruelty? I would challenge you to take a moment when you're in that place of struggle and deliberately change the words you're using. After all, in the manner of our Creator, our words also have power. Replace your vitriol with compassion, your hatred with understanding, and your resentment with love. Remind yourself that while you may have gotten to this low point, you also have the power to climb back out. Talk about yourself the way you would talk about someone you deeply love, flaws and all. This is the power of what unity teaches as denials and affirmations. You deny power to the negative belief, essentially erasing it from your consciousness over time, and you then fill that newly created void with an affirmative in the positive. I deny self-doubt any power over my life, for I am confident in my own validity as a perfect expression of God. I deny guilt any power over me, for I am always growing into myself as a perfect expression of God. I deny resentment any standing in my life, for I am loved and inherently worthy as a perfect expression of God. I can say with confidence that if you take the moment in those times of trial to reframe your inner dialogue with yourself, that you will find you are quite capable of believing that you are good, that humanity is good. If you go within, into the silence, and listen for the still, small voice of God, you will find that it is the voice of a patient and loving creative force who knows without a doubt that you possess an infinite capacity for goodness, if you only allow yourself to believe in it. You will find that you are, whoa, my last page is gone, there it is. I was like, whoa, what? Hello. You will find that you are deeply connected to God as an inextricable expression of God, much as a wave is still the ocean, even if it washes onto the shore. You wouldn't say that it is less a part of the ocean simply because it expresses itself according to its nature. You also cannot be less a part of God simply because you express according to your nature. It also, I challenge you to release your belief in that separation from God, and instead be willing to connect to the belief that you are inherently good as a perfect expression of God. I'm going to read a poem real quick then. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's all yours after that. So this was when we were learning about divine paradox, because that is a theological thing you definitely have to address. In the way that Persephone brings life and warmth, yet also rules over the dead, we too are both and after the manner of our Creator, and indeed the whole of the manifest universe. At once simple, the simplest, yet complex beyond the scope of our faculties to understand it, divine mind moves over the face of the waters, impersonally powering the cosmos into being, yet to us, as points of divine light expressing the divine, integral to our very being, in a way that demands the personal touch, a mother's fathomless love. So it is both unfailing principle and personal in our experience of it. Not that divine mind personalizes itself to us like our social media feed, but that in our individuation, at our specific point of expression, we create through our growing awareness the experience of the personal. As we grow from seeing the sun rise and fall in our youth to understanding that we are the ones in motion around it, so our growing awareness of divine mind creates the change we perceive, for divine mind is changeless and unwavering. The change we perceive between realizing spirit as principle and experiencing it as personal directly relates to our awareness of spirit, vacillating as does our awareness, as we create our expression upon the stretched canvas of experience. So the drop of salty ocean may only be aware of itself as a single drop, yet it is the ocean, part and parcel, and even if it dares to scale the shore, it always returns to its source, seamlessly reintegrating into the whole of which it was always a part. From our vantage upon this tiny rock, the vastness of beingness dances upon the edge of our understanding, feebly grasped as grains of sand through clumsy fingers, yearning to examine it fully, yet never quite able to see all pieces at once, individual yet infinite. Within, without, above, and beyond all things, the immanence of divine mind also transcends reality, in the same way that we are much more than the sum of our parts. Divine mind to be present in all times and places, to weave throughout the entirety of existence as the essence, the fabric, the substance, yet far and away enfolding and permeating as all things and no thing, requires a more vast understanding of life than we can yet perceive, though we may catch a glimmer of truth in the silence. Receptive soil, though dark and teeming with life energies, also has little power to create. It must be acted upon, given the seeds into which it imbues the spirit of life, so divine mind embodies both the wisdom to create, to act, and to expand, and the love from which all things draw their existence, deep and all-encompassing. Push and pull, in oneness the energy of the universe spirals, forever dancing with itself as stars burst into life, only to burn out, erupting into a dazzling supernova, sowing stardust throughout the cosmos, seeds potent with wisdom, to take root in the infinite love of the divine, to grow in grace and harmony. This, the final paradox, the unyielding law to which all of existence is bound, and the sweet, supple grace that catches all who deviate from that law. A willow firmly rooted in its conviction, yet resilient enough to flow with the harshest wind. Divine mind, again, is both and all. For us, tiny points of light needs must that we must examine the infinite through a finite lens. Yet, in collective consciousness and silence, we glean experience beyond our own and revel in truth as we learn to celebrate our oneness with all things, harmonizing and growing ever more into the infinite source from where we come and to where we are going. Forever evolving unhindered in the spiral dance of life, we move to and from boundless love as one, none, and all. And so it is. Thanks. Oh, I was upset.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Wonderful.
I think there's cinnamon rolls downstairs.
Yeah.
I got
Thank you, Leslie, that was great, thank you.
That was fantastic. She gets A plus 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 plus.
Yes.
Yeah, give her another hand. Linda has asked me to step in as she's going to a haunting. So, just to close out and to thank Leslie for a wonderful, wonderful sermon. It was remindful, in depth. My goodness, girl, you go deep, 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 deep. Yeah, I appreciated that. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. So, don't forget that next week is fall back, daylight savings time, correct?
Yep.
And if you don't, we'll see you the next time.
Don't be early, don't be late.
Yeah. And there is wonderful cinnamon rolls that this lovely lady made, correct? Mom, grandma, oh mom, okay. Leslie's, and little one, yes, okay. So, if you would please join us for our closing healing prayer circle. And then we will do the peace song and Ricky